Hi everybody, welcome to the final webinar in our MLA Updates Impact Series. Today we're going to be focusing on building community trust in the red meat sector, and it's been a great journey over the last 5 weeks to be running these webinars that have been a really fantastic opportunity to update you on our key programs of work and particularly the things that are creating real impact and demonstrating the investments that we're making, with and on behalf of the industry to help drive towards these goals of doubling the value of red meat sales by 2030, which comes out of the Red Meat 2030 10-year plan, and demonstrate the approach we're taking to a range of these really key areas, and today's a really important one of those around this community trust and engagement on the positioning of red meat. The webinars have also built on the ones we ran last year in 2020, and the same as what we did last year. The recordings of these will be posted on the website, and they're available to be used as a future resource, and we've seen that being a really valuable way to capture information. There's been as many or more people have actually looked at the recordings than were online, so it's great to see that it's not just the immediate update, but it's also the use of those resources later as well. So, and this one will be no different. Just a reminder that today's a webinar, so everyone's going to be on mute and the cameras will be off, but there will be a Q&A session at the end, so you have the opportunity to ask questions, but it will be through the Q&A function. So you'll see a little speech bubble that has got a question mark in it that you can click on. It'll either be at the top of your screen if you're on a computer, or I think the menu bar might be at the bottom if you're on a tablet. But you just punch a question in there, and we'll either answer that during the session. If we run out of time, we'll make sure we get answers to any of those questions and include them in the recording or with the recordings when we post that online. If there's any significant technical difficulty, which we haven't actually had this year or last year, we'll find a way to make sure we get reconnected with you. So now on to today's webinar. So today's discussion is going to be all about promoting our red meat industry's positive credentials across the broader community. And it's never been more important than now, and we've seen that particularly in the last few weeks with the discussions around the Glasgow meeting. And MLA invests in a large number of initiatives to support so many activities that engage with the community and ultimately our consumers as well. So to tell you more about these, the speakers today will be led by Lucy Broad, who's our General Manager of Communications. So she'll facilitate today's session and give an update of an overview of the programs and the work we're doing supporting red meat positioning. And then Lucy's also going to be joined on the webinar today by Samantha Jamison, who's our Group Stakeholder Collaboration Manager, Veronique Droules, who's our Senior Manager of Nutrition. Anybody who's been involved in the nutrition space in red meat would know of Vero, and Desley Sheedy, who's the Community Programs Digital Engagement Manager. So welcome to the session today, and I look forward to the presentations. Thank you for joining, and I'll now hand over to Lucy. Fire away.
Awesome, Jason. Thank you, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today to talk about a topic that we feel pretty passionate about here at MLA. Earlier this year, MLA really escalated red meat positioning to be a priority across the whole business. We wanted to achieve in a very short space of time ensuring that all our stakeholders were armed and able to respond to community questions and concerns about the red meat and livestock industry. And to be able to do that with really robust and evidence-based but easy to understand information. We know the community has high expectations around how we manage our livestock and the environment. As Jason just mentioned, we've witnessed the global discussions over recent months, from the UN Food Systems Summit through to more recently at COP26. So we're all very aware of the challenges we face, but also the opportunities, including being able to demonstrate to the community that we're not only meeting, but in many cases exceeding their expectations around nutrition, animal welfare and environmental management. Next slide, thanks. So where exactly does this work sit within MLA's strategic plan and annual investment plan? Well, as I mentioned, it involves the whole business, but it really dovetails very neatly into MLA's community communications program, which is an incredibly important part of our focus in the communications group. The area of work is a key pillar of Red Meat 2030, the industry's strategic plan. It focuses on the perceptions of our customers, our consumers, and our communities about our industry. It's really all about getting people feeling good about eating Australian red meat, recognising the vital role that our industry plays in food production and food security, and trusting us, trusting that we'll deliver high quality and high value products. Thanks, next slide. So as I mentioned, we've accelerated multiple streams of work over the last few months, and we're going to take you through some of those today. I'll talk about some of the important work that we do supporting the measurement of sustainability across the industry, work that really underpins a lot of our messaging and resources that we're producing. And I'll talk through what some of those resources look like and how we're working hard to get them out into the hands of industry and then further afield so we can all be a part of telling that great story. Sam Jamieson is going to talk about some of the consumer insights that importantly guide our messaging and strategy, and will take us through our Good Meat platform, which is, if you like, the digital home of our community-facing content. Sam will also talk about the work that MLA is doing to include content about the red meat and livestock industry into Australia's primary schools curriculum. Vero Jule will talk us through the nutrition messaging and the resources and the very targeted communications out to the wider health sector. And Desley is going to talk us through an area that we're actually asked about a lot, which is how we use social media to engage the community and generate positive sentiment, and importantly, the impact that we're having in that space. Next slide, thanks. Well, MLA's Red Meat Green Facts, which was launched at Beef Australia this year, is industry's what we call pocket guide to support the sharing of positive fact-based information about Australian red meat and how it's produced. It covers all the key topics: environment, animal welfare, plant-based alternative meats, or fake meats, and it provides evidence-based facts to equip us all to be better at busting myths about our industry, as well as engaging and educating the community around the world-class credentials of Australian red meat. It's online, it's very easily shareable, and should just note that there's an updated version coming out soon, which will include a separate section to be called Red Meat Health Facts, all part of the same document, but it will further build out red meat's nutrition credentials. Next slide, thanks. MLA also manages the beef and sheep sustainability frameworks on behalf of industry, and they're an incredibly important industry-led initiative that commit industry to a sustainability pathway of best practice. They report on performance through independent evidence against critical indicators determined by the frameworks around animal welfare, environmental stewardship, economic resilience, and people and community. And many of those evidence-based metrics, and you'll have heard of these, the net increases in tree and grass cover, and of course, industry's net reduction in greenhouse gases since 2005, are critical parts of our messaging out to the community. The Australian Beef Sustainability Framework this year presented its 4th annual report, and the first Australian Sheep Sustainability Framework was officially launched this year. This year, MLA also launched its own sustainability report in recognition of the importance of demonstrating transparency and in highlighting the considerable and very impactful investments that we make as an organisation around sustainability to support the broader industry goals. It's going to be an annual report, and it's proving really effective in demonstrating MLA's commitment to sustainability to not only government stakeholders, but also to many of our supply chain stakeholders, both here in Australia and also overseas. Next slide, thanks. That need to better tell the industry's sustainability story has been the catalyst for another quite significant program of work. MLA has invested heavily this year in around 20 video case studies around sustainability practices. This work is also underpinned by the knowledge that, firstly, digital content is extremely effective on social media, and secondly, that farmers remain one of the most trusted sources of information in the community. So MLA is now rolling out these producer-led videos. They capture the innovation, the tools, the practice change of our livestock producers and value chains. They're being produced in collaboration with MLA's adoption team, so they're also being used to support other producers wanting to make progress around sustainability, but they're being produced and edited in a way that will resonate with the broader community. MLA has also committed to producing a series of myth-busting animations. You may have seen some of these. We've released some already around methane, the biogenic methane cycle, fake plant-based meat, in the wind, animations around carbon neutral sheep production, and the fact that Australians really do not eat too much meat. So look out for those. Desley is going to be talking a little bit later about how we're pushing this digital content on social media, importantly outside our industry circles, and how by doing that we're engaging a new audience of younger red meat reducers. So we really are trying to get out of that echo chamber of industry talking to industry and getting out to the people who are really reducing their red meat or have concerns about a red meat. Next slide, thanks. So this month you may have noticed, or if you haven't received it, you will notice, I suspect when it arrives in your letterbox, that Feedback magazine looks a bit different. It's twice as thick as usual for a start, and it has some very different content. We decided earlier this year that as part of our push to provide better messages and resources to stakeholders to help us all engage in conversations about the industry, that we would, if you like, take over one of our regular Feedback magazines and turn it into a resource publication. So this magazine showcases a range of industry ambassadors who are already leading the way in telling the industry's positive story. And it's full of useful, shareable resources, key messages, infographics, a social media training toolkit, and also, of course, links to where all those digital materials can be picked up and shared. And they are all, of course, available online. Thanks. Next slide. This year, MLA also expanded its ambassadors for the red meat industry program. Now, this is a program for industry stakeholders, but also now for those outside of our industry to provide professional training in community engagement, communication through media and social media, and to help with messaging that will build trust with the community about the red meat and livestock sector. It's focused on creating ambassadors who have the skills, the knowledge, and importantly, the confidence to have positive conversations and engage with the community across a whole range of topics and across the whole spectrum of communication channels and activities. If you're interested in participating, there's a whole lot more information on our website, and we would really encourage you to take a look, and we'd love you to be involved. Next slide, thanks. To help us be better across the whole supply chain in messaging and telling our story, the Red Meat Industry Corporate Affairs Unit, or ICAU as it's fondly known, was formed earlier this year. ICAU works really closely with our peak industry councils to support effective media and stakeholder engagement, as well as issues and crisis management. It's helping to prioritise and manage some of the shared communication challenges and opportunities that we face as an industry more effectively than what we might have been doing up to now. For example, through the development of agreed messaging around key industry issues that we can all share. ICAU was also responsible not so long ago for driving some of the consumer research which found widespread confusion in the marketplace caused by the labelling of plant-based products trying to look like meat. The unit is also delivering a range of support and capacity building to the PICs, things like media training, media and stakeholder monitoring, and planning for crisis simulations. It's overseen by a corporate affairs task force, which is made up of representatives from each of our peak industry councils and is chaired by Jason. Next slide, thanks. So all of the messages and materials that we've been producing this year that we're actually talking about today are, of course, not only relevant to domestic audiences. This year, MLA has been supporting not just the red meat industry, actually, but also the broader protein sector to come together with a unified voice in the lead up to the UN Food Systems Summit in Washington in September, and then, of course, COP26 in Rome. And that's included pulling together resources to support the Australian Department of Agriculture's participation in the UN Food System Summit, and also materials that the global industry has been able to use to share consistent and positive messaging about the industry. Again, just trying to get the industry on the one page and have consistent messaging. Of course, we know that this is just the beginning, and following the Glasgow meetings, there's expected to be an ongoing global livestock coalition that MLA will continue to support as the industry requires us to do that. So that's all from me. I'd now like to introduce Sam Jamieson, who's our Group Manager, Stakeholder Collaboration. In all of this work that we're doing, one of the drivers we're very conscious of is understanding how the broader community perceives our industry, what they're interested to learn more about, what they're concerned about, and how that's changing over time. So Sam's going to take us through some of those consumer insights, the research that MLA does, and exactly how we use that to inform what we do in this community communication space. So thanks, Sam. Over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. So building on Lucy's overview of the red meat positioning program of work that MLA is implementing, I'd now like to take you through the community sentiment research and, importantly, how we're utilising the insights from this research in developing our community communications program. And as my colleagues Vero and Desley will also explain, how we're engaging the community to build that trust. So we've been undertaking community consumer insights research since 2010, so over a decade worth of data that we have. It's an online survey of main grocery buyers and meal preparers in the metro areas of Australia. Next slide, please. So the key insights for this year is that overall red meat consumption is stable, which is good. We're seeing that the drivers and barriers to red meat consumption are gradually changing. We found that health is quite polarising, but it's also a key to drive consumption of red meat. We're seeing that red meat industry perceptions are stable, and really interesting this year, we found that the knowledge of the industry influences the perceptions towards the red meat industry. And we already know this, but we've actually got some stats now to demonstrate this, that farmers are amongst the most trusted professions in Australia. And now for our community communications program, it really does mean that we just need to continue to focus on raising knowledge. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean about that. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, consumption trends have remained relatively stable. As we can see over the past decade, those that are looking to increase their consumption in green is about 9%. About 63% have said that they're not going to change their red meat consumption. But a bit of a worry, we've still got around about 28% of the people in this survey are saying that they are looking to reduce their red meat consumption. Next slide, please. So it's really important that we have a look at what are the motivations for people that are changing their red meat consumption. We want to learn from those that are wanting to consume more often. And as we can see, the top 4 reasons for wanting to consume more often, 3 out of 4 of these, 75% are a nutrition or a health reason. So a source of protein, source of nutrition, source of iron, and of course, they just like meat. But as I mentioned, as a bit of a concern, we really do need to watch what are the top reasons for eating less meat. And now the order of these 4 items has been pretty consistent over the past decade or so. So too expensive, health concerns, environment and animal welfare. And over the past few years, we've seen the concern around environment and animal welfare increasing. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. So next slide, please. And we're always asked about, but what about the vegetarians? Well, we do track them as well. And we've seen that this year, 9% of people are claiming that they're vegetarians when we ask them the question, you know, how would they describe their diet? But interestingly, 58% of vegetarians also eat meat occasionally. So when you really look down to what is a true vegan or vegetarian, it's about 4%, and that number has been consistent over the past few years. Next slide, please. Now, also very important is to have a look at what the perceptions of the production of the red meat industry are. And as you can see, they are fairly stable and quite positive. So if we look at the green, which is people having good or very good perceptions of the industry, for cattle, it's about 66% are saying that they have very positive perceptions towards the industry. And for sheep meat, it's about 61%. And pleasingly, if we have a look at the negatives, which is the red and the pinky colour, they haven't changed that much. They're relatively low. Next slide, please. And when we have a look at the knowledge of the industry, it's currently 1 in 3 people say that they've got knowledge of the industry. Now, if we look back, a few years ago, it was about 1 in 5. So it's great that the number of people that say that they have knowledge of the industry is increasing. And even better, about 1 in 2, just over a half, are wanting to learn more about the industry. Next slide, please. And why this is really important is because we actually this year we got the research company to dive a bit deeper into how does a better knowledge of the industry change your perceptions towards the industry. And you can see the orange or yellow colour is the total survey, but when we look at just those that feel that they have more knowledge of the industry, you can see the perceptions jump. So I feel good about the production of Australian beef and lamb, it's a 13 percentage point increase from 63% to 76%. Care about the environment, once again, a 16 percentage increase amongst those that have knowledge of the industry. And the same for animal welfare. It's farmed and raised in a humane manner. Next slide, please. And we also asked about, would you think more positively of the red meat industry if emissions could be reduced to net zero by 2030? So in other words, our CN30 initiative. And we saw once again a large jump amongst those that have knowledge of the industry, a 12 percentage point increase. And ultimately, of course, we're wanting to know how does that impact whether they want to consume more beef and lamb, and we saw that once again that also increased from 9% of people up to 17% of people saying that they would increase their red meat consumption. Next slide, please. And when we ask people about where are you sourcing information on our industry, particularly around nutrition, animal welfare and environmental impact, with the 3 core areas of our program, and not surprisingly, it's the internet. It tops it across all 3 pillars, but also health organisations, health professionals and industry bodies are also where people are looking for this type of information. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we've now got some statistics that actually prove that we know that farmers are amongst the most trusted professions in Australia. So up with doctors, scientists, engineers, teachers, etc. Farmers are a very, very trusted profession within Australia, which is great for our communications program. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the implications, so what these insights and how they help us with the development of our communications program. We know that utilising farmers to boost industry knowledge of the paddock to plate story is likely to help build trust and understanding of the industry. We know that raising awareness amongst the community on our industry's ambition to be carbon neutral will likely improve consumer perceptions towards environmental stewardship and overall industry perceptions. We also know that informing the community of the health and nutritional attributes may encourage consumers to increase their red meat consumption, and it's going to help alleviate concerns amongst red meat producers. And we know that the internet and digital engagement is the most likely method in which we're going to be able to communicate and provide information. Next slide, please. Now, the platform in which we communicate with the community is around a brand called Australian good meat, more than just good for you. And as Lucy mentioned, we're very excited. We've just launched the new website, so please go and have a look. Have a look from your mobile, actually, and I'll explain why. So this website, we're targeting the red meat reducers. They're more likely a younger, probably more tended towards female, and in the metro areas of Australia. We needed to provide really easy to understand information, but they needed to be all backed by facts. We're really busting the myths, and we are tackling the really tough questions, particularly that the red meat reducers have. And it's a mobile first design. And why this is important is because we know that when people are looking on social media, 80% of social media use is via the mobile phone. And as Desi will later explain, we're doing a lot on social media. And so when people are from social media going back to the website, we need our website to look really great on a mobile phone. So please do go and have a look at it. It's www.goodmeat.com.au. I'm sure you'll like it. Next slide, please. Now, we're often asked about our school education program, and we revamped it just last term with a new program called Smart Farming Virtual Classrooms, where we're utilising producers across the supply chain to talk to mostly primary school kids. The next slide, please. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, we've actually got some virtual classrooms running this week. We've got one tomorrow on the Sustainable Farm, and we've got 2 more later in the week. So please do take a chance. We will send out a link after this to log in and have a look at some of these virtual farm virtual classrooms. Now, we're hosting about 30 of these sessions this fiscal year. In term 3 and 4, over 6,000 students have registered for these sessions, and we're getting some really great feedback from the teachers. 92% of the teachers were satisfied with the sessions, and you can see some comments here from the teachers just saying what a fantastic experience it was for the children, and a really great learning opportunity for them. Now, before I hand over to my colleague Vero, as Jason and Lucy have mentioned previously, if you've got any questions about any of the research that we've talked about, any of the content in Lucy or my presentation or in the coming presentations, please just jot them down in the little Q&A function area, and we'll get to them after the webinar. So I'd now like to hand over to Veronique, my colleague, to talk about the role of Australian red meat in a healthy and sustainable diet. Over to you, Vero.
Thanks, Sam, and hello everybody who is online. It would be nice to be able to see you all. So as you heard from Sam, nutrition and health are key drivers of consumption, and so in my presentation I'll explain why our key messages around red meat 3 to 4 times a week in healthy balanced meals is a win for consumers who want to follow a healthy diet, a win for those who are concerned about the environment, and a win for Australians who like eating red meat 3 to 4 times a week, which we know is probably one of the biggest drivers. Next slide, please. Our approach for identifying key messages about red meat in a healthy and sustainable diet is to generate data and insights in these 3 topic areas. The first is around healthy diets and the environment, where increasingly we are seeing recommendations to eat less red meat. In healthy diets by life stage, we've sought to understand how we can help consumers who enjoy eating red meat in a diet that is both nutritionally adequate, so it provides enough essential nutrients, and the right balance of foods which are recommended for good health to reduce risk of chronic diseases. So it's that nutrition and health, which is kind of that polarizing bit that Sam talked about, that drives either reasons to eat and reasons to reduce. The last relates to Australian red meat's nutritional value and its consumption, which is important information for determining dietary recommendations, because in nutrition we either recommend more of foods that people not eating enough of, and less of those that people are eating too much of. So it's very important to have the right data to understand what is the answer. And then you also need information about nutritional value to make nutrition claims, because you don't know whether it's a good or not a good source of the various nutrients. Next slide, please. Our communications are published on our website called MLA Healthy Meals, and this provides a credible reference for our key messages and practical resources. And you can see some of those practical resources, which are what we give to dietitians and GPs to help them provide dietary advice to their patients. So it's important that they have access to credible information, that they feel confident using our resources. And we know from our resources, from our research, that our resources are very well regarded and quite popular amongst dietitians and GPs, which is a very, very pleasing information. Next slide, please. Our latest report on the environmental impact of red meat in a healthy diet was published on our website on the 1st of November. So if you follow that link on www.mlahealthymeals.com.au, you can read that report. You can also read about the research that we funded through our MLA Nutrition Research Program that really essentially answered two key questions. What is a sustainable diet and what is sustainable red meat consumption? To raise awareness and understanding of the science, because it's actually a little bit complicated, we're sponsoring a webinar and podcast for dietitians, and these will be published on our website on the 25th of November for the webinar and the 25th of January for the podcast. Next year in February, we'll be working with Medical Republic to do some advertorials for GPs, because we understand that GPs are actually very interested in this topic of climate change and the diet. And Medical Republic is a very popular newspaper for GPs. Next slide, please. So what does the report tell us? The report says that portion guidance is the key to a sustainable consumption of all foods, including red meat. Now, what this quadrant analysis explains is why getting Australians to eat less red meat is really not the solution for a sustainable diet. So this is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to talk you through it. On the x-axis is the diet quality score, and that actually is a measure of the food and amounts recommended in the Australian dietary guidelines. And then the y-axis is the environmental impact score, and what that is, it combines the impact of three indicators: climate, water, and cropland. Why that is important is that most comparisons are just done on one indicator, which is climate. But when you start looking at a number of indicators, you can see that the differences between foods becomes less important. And that's important because you've got to get the right data to get the right solutions. So what you can see from this quadrant analysis is that when you need two key strategies really to get to the sustainable diet, which is where we want to be in the top right-hand quadrant. So the portion guidance strategy is your first strategy, and to get Australians to eat in line with the dietary guidelines, it improves the quality of the diet, but it absolutely doesn't have any impact on the environmental impact. And that is because the amount of food consumed determines environmental impacts, regardless of whether the diet is healthy or unhealthy. Strategy 2 shows you that to lower the environmental impact of the Australian diet, you need sustainable food production and waste reduction strategies, because most of the impact is in the food production system. So it really confirms what Sam showed, that programs like CN30 are really needed to reduce environmental impacts, and that is actually going to convince consumers to feel confident eating red meat. what is really quite interesting from this research is it shows that the impact of swapping high impact foods for lower impact alternatives is small. And really the most important thing that one can do in terms of sustainable consumption is to eat all meats in the right amount for good health and to reduce household food waste. So this is a really important piece of evidence that really confirms that CN30 is really the solution for red meat in a healthy and sustainable diet, and supports our consumption of 3 to 4 messaging. So that's what the next slide shows, is that sustainable red meat consumption is really, it's really what it says is that Australians can continue to eat red meat 3 to 4 times a week, which is what they've been doing since 1995. And on average, that amount consumed is in line with Australian dietary guidelines. But what you do see is that portion sizes differ between individuals and meals. Whenever I tell somebody about the average consumption being in line with dietary guidelines, inevitably somebody will go, oh, but I know someone who eats a lot and I know somebody who eats a little. And that's what we find in the data is there is wide individual variation. And so people are confused about what is the right amount. So providing portion guidance within the context of meal planning is a very compelling message, which is why our key message 3 to 4 times a week in healthy balanced meals is a win for healthy diets, because that's pretty much what the dietary guideline says. It's a win for the environment, which we've just shown. And of course, it's a win for enjoying red meat. Next slide, please. So our communication channels cover key settings where consumers look for information. I've explained about our nutrition resources that help health professionals like dietitians and GPs provide dietary advice. Last week, you heard about how trade and marketing integrate nutrition messages through their programs. And Sam has just explained how Good Meat provides information on nutrition, and next Desley will explain how information is being communicated through social media. For all these programs, MLA Healthy Meals website provides a credible source of information, and that really what we're trying to do is to provide these various stakeholders with confidence to communicate these key messages, and ultimately consumers to feel confident eating red meat in a healthy and sustainable diet. So now I'd like to introduce you to Desley Sheedy, who is our digital environment engagement manager, and she will be talking about how we are engaging the community through social media. Over to you, Desley.
Thanks, Vero. So we use social media quite frequently across the business, and as you can see here, our real key digital platforms are Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and obviously the website. And we use these digital platforms to share stories and to educate a community audience. And it's really important that that's it, where we're talking to the community. We're not talking to industry. We're not sort of talking directly to customers as such. It's just that broad community audience. Next slide, please. So when we create content for these platforms, we really want to create content that aligns with community values. And the best way we have found to do that so far is really sharing, having farmers share their story. As we've heard a number of times during this sort of presentation, that farmers are really well trusted. And the authenticity that they can bring through their videos and their stories really resonates with a community audience. But it's also really important because it's really hard to refute someone's personal experience and story. So generally, we might get questions about sort of issues in the videos themselves, but most of the commentary is really positive, and it's people asking questions rather than necessarily challenging the narrative. Next slide, please. So as Lucy said, we've filmed close to 20 of these case studies across Australia, meeting both beef and sheep producers, a wide range of different operations. And so far, we've put 7 of these hero videos out onto social media. So that's 7 different producer stories from across Australia going out to a community audience. And then from there, we really create social first content. So we have a hero video that tells the whole story, and we like to create really short snippets, social edits of videos that really engage on social media. So we've rolled out 30 of those, and we've also had 2 animated explainer videos go out as well. So we can see here that the engagement rate is really positive. We've got sort of 9% organic and 24% when we amplify this content. And that's really an important thing, is to avoid that echo chamber of sort of industry commenting on things. We really pay to amplify this audience on social media, this content on social media, to an urban audience, a young audience. And we sort of set the criteria around an interest in people that are interested in health and well-being and sustainability, so that we really target that flexitarian red meat reducer audience. And as we can see, the videos have been seen, been through played, so through the whole video, not just a 1 or 2 second view, 190,000 times with a reach of over 1 million people. And with videos like with people like Stuart Austin, we've just got amazing engagement. So engagement is obviously when somebody likes the video, shares the video, comments on the video and things like that. So it's people actively engaging with the content, not just passively seeing it and scrolling past. Videos like that of Adam and Jacinta Coffee have just got an amazing reach due to the number of shares as well as the amplification. And some of the explainer videos like the plant-based fake meat and the methane carbon cycle, just the number of shares, 260 shares, I think it was on Friday. I think that's increased again, just from people not just in the red meat industry, but from people interested in this topic, sharing it with their audience and their followers on social media. Next slide, please. So the myth-busting animations, these are really working well. They're really simplified. A format that works really well is the animated explainer on social media. And the visual styling of the cartoon is really engaging in itself. It's the kind of thing that'll stop people scrolling to say, what's this? And that's what we need. We need people to stop the scroll, cut through the millions of messages they see every day on social media and watch. And these videos are perfectly designed to do that, while explaining complex topics in a similar way. And with everything we do here, we drive people back to the Good Meat website. So we're creating pathways for more information. And these ones have worked really well. And we've seen that through the website traffic and analytics to see people are watching the video and then clicking for more information. Next slide, please. So moving on to our social media influencers, we really set out this year to do this in a groundbreaking way. We wanted to use the voices of influencers on social media to shift perceptions around red meat. We also wanted to really lift the positive conversations that were going on using these credible voices and to make people feel okay about eating red meat. So we've used a range of different influencers, and we've used sort of predominantly starting out with people in the health and wellness space. And as you can see, we've got the tier 1 influencers, that these are the people that have over 100,000 followers on Instagram, and the tier 2, which should have anywhere between 10,000 and 100,000 followers. Next slide, please. So what we've done is I've said, influencers are more than just people that have a lot of followers on social media. They're content creators. They create content that really resonates with their audiences. And that's the reason why we look to work with these people. It's not because they've just got a lot of followers, but we can also see that their followers are the right demographic, so urban, young, and also that they get high levels of engagement with their audiences. So Harrison Reid, for example, Bondi lifeguard, in case you don't know, he's really in that health and wellness space, but he also loves the outdoors. So we've been able to work with him to move from talking about red meat's health and nutrition benefits to really talking about how the industry can reduce emissions and be carbon neutral by 2030. And we can see here that people, it's reached, 120,000 people and it's got a high engagement rate. And from here, we use this content to amplify it further to that target audience, using Harrison's unique and authentic voice and content style to reach, again, that target audience. Next slide, please. Another one here is Shan Cooper, who we love, an ex-vegetarian who talked about having an iron hangover from not eating red meat for, I think it was about a decade. And she created some really simple content talking about her personal experience, you know, her experience of not eating red meat and how it left her body feeling. And that really opened up the conversation for people to say, oh, me too, I've experienced that. Again, like creating a safe space for people to talk about eating red meat, sharing their experiences. And through that, you can see the attribution, which is, you know, of the comments that came through, how many were really on topic. And it's about a third. So it's not just people saying, we love you, Shan, or that looks like a nice recipe. It's people saying, you know, I've experienced this, or I'm iron deficient and things like that. And then Shan's really good at going back in and talking to them and engaging them around the topic, which lets, you know, really positive sentiment come out in this post. Next slide, please. Our final example today is from Natalie Sum, who just creates the most beautiful visual content. She's a photographer. She really appeals to those urban multicultural audiences. So really a good fit with that flexitarian audience. And you know, she tells this story about how she stopped eating red meat or meat in general, went vegetarian after watching Cowspiracy, and how, you know, just the processed products she was eating were not good for her health. They weren't good for the environment, and how, you know, she really educated herself on the red meat industry and how it's taking proactive action for climate change and looking at regenerative agriculture, and how she incorporates more red meat into her diet because she's learnt this about the industry. And again, you know, she has that authentic voice. She shares it with her followers, and, you know, again, positive stories come through. People were thanking her for sharing the information and giving them access to information about things that the Australian red meat industry is doing. And again, overwhelmingly positive comments coming through. Next slide, please. So we know that obviously raising awareness of the industry's goal to have net zero emissions by 2030 has such a positive impact on perceptions. So we've created a lot of resources online that Lucy mentioned previously that sort of talk to this, and we are rolling out a number of campaigns, and we have been rolling out campaigns related to specifically across our target neutral 2030 goal, and sort of informing the industry, consumers and community about this. Next slide. This leads me to an exciting thing on National Ag Day, which is Friday. We have an influencer event. So we have Dr. Matt Agnew. You might not know him, but he is an ex-Bachelor Australia contestant and an astrophysicist. He's also a science communicator, and he has over 120,000 followers on social media. So he's got the really good appeal. He's got the the trust from being a scientist, but he's got the popular culture appeal of being a contestant on The Bachelor and being a social media influencer. So we're doing a live event with him, and we're getting him to talk to some of our industry influencers themselves. So we've obviously got people like Mandy Matthews, Zoe Carter, and Mel McGorman, who are all producers and involved in the industry that have a lot of followers of their own, but they're fantastic content producers. They can really talk to an audience. So we've got them having a conversation together to really unpack the carbon neutral 2030 story and help answer questions in a live event. So that's going to be really exciting and a first for us. So again, there'll be more information coming out about this soon. Next slide. So with all this, there's a lot of passion in the industry, and we really want to help people in the industry advocate for our industry, share these great stories. And the best way to do that is to start engaging with the Good Meat channels on social media. So, follow us, like, comment, share, that sort of thing, increase that organic reach of content. And the other one is look at the feedback magazine that has come out this month, or in the notes that follow this webinar. There's a guide for how to start to engage on social media, how to advocate social media and use it to, create those conversations around red meat myth bust, false information, and just use your authentic voice to communicate and connect with the community. That's all from me. So thank you very much, and I'll throw back to Lucy.
Thanks, Desley. That's great. Great summary. And as you can see, we're really excited about how much we're seeing how these great positive messages are breaking out beyond the industry into younger communities, into audiences that we know have questions about red meat and about how the industry operates. And we're really excited about just getting you all to help us do that. Some great resources that we've talked about today. As I say, you'll be receiving it in your mailbox very soon with the feedback magazine and all those resources online through the Good Meat platform. So really looking forward to working with you all to help better tell our story. So now we do have some time for questions. There's been some great questions coming through. Thank you for that. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. If we don't get them today, we will come back and answer them all and make them all available on the website. So first to a question about internet search and how do we ensure that most internet searches end up with us? Obviously, internet searches about particular issues to do with red meat and livestock, or anyone who has concerns about red meat and livestock production. Desley, I might throw to you on that one, if that's okay.
Thanks, Lucy. It's a great question. Obviously, we know that the internet's such a great source for people searching things. So when we've developed the Good Meat website, we've really taken SEO or search engine optimization to the forefront. So we've built the website structurally so that it has the ability for Google to come up with the best search results from it. We've used a lot of insights from what community are searching. So any data we can get from searches and things online, we've really used that to craft the language in how we've constructed the content, and that's sort of a subtle thing, but it really helps to resonate with audiences and come up in the search results. And the last piece of the puzzle is we are about to invest in search engine optimization in paid campaigns to target different search queries. And the best thing about all of this is we get a lot of data coming back from Google, so we can better refine our content and see where we put our money to make sure that we are getting the impact we need.
Thanks, Desley. Great. I might stay with you actually. A question, given everything that we're doing, all very well, but where to now? What about the future? What plans do we have in the pipeline? And perhaps if you start with that, and then perhaps Sam can chime in as well.
Well, like I said, data, anything we do on digital, we're looking really closely at the results to see what's performed and what hasn't. We're really monitoring trends through social listening to look for opportunities to talk about things that we might not talk about, to spot emerging sort of queries that are coming through from the community. And we really use that in our content planning. So we are looking at doing a series of campaigns. As I said, we're about to kick off this sort of campaign around carbon neutral 2030 and the industry's environmental credentials at the end of the week. And we have another sort of series of ongoing campaigns in the pipeline that address really topical issues. But aside from that, we know that we will continue working with influencers and we, again, assess their performance and see who we continue working with. But we know there's a really big opportunity to get more stories, not just from producers to share, but from the broader supply chain. There's a lot of interest in the red meat industry and, it's not just producers, it's across the entire supply chain. So we'll start to do that. And as I said, obviously always building the content on the website to drive people back to it. Sam, did you want to jump in there?
I think, Desley, you did a great job. I think you've covered most of the major things. As you've probably gathered, the majority of our work is going to be really digitally focused because we know that's where people are searching for the information. So in addition to the campaigns, continuing to work with social influencers, getting more content from along the supply chain into the digital space. With COVID ending, we're now going to be able to get back to some of the royal shows. So we will be able to have a bit of face-to-face engagement as well. So the next one coming up will be the Sydney Royal Show. So our Good Meat team will be there talking with people face to face as well. And we'll also have some of our ambassadors for the red meat industry there, because we know that the community also love having the opportunity to talk to a real farmer. So they're probably the main things that we've got coming up, but it's a very, very active program. And we're just really excited about the new website. So please have a look at that, and that's probably going to be the core areas coming up. Lucy, back to you.
Great, thanks, Sam. There's a great question that's just come through around, are we seeing enough communications about CN30, particularly on the back of COP26? It would be very relevant. Indeed, very relevant. And MLA, obviously, as a service provider, you know, it doesn't get involved in debates or discussions around policy. That's not something we can do. But we're certainly not backward in helping the industry just say how much we've been on the front foot with CN30 since 2017, when it was first announced that the industry would be aiming to be carbon neutral by 2030. So we're absolutely doing that, providing information to relevant stakeholders to share, supporting, you know, the Australian government if they're looking for what R&D we've been doing in that space, some of the feed additives and some of the soil sequestration work and so on. So absolutely been very, very active with that. And I think what we have seen is amazing coverage through so many of the industry participants who are already incredibly active in that space. And you know, you may have seen, you know, Landline and various other programs where some of those producers are talking about, you know, being carbon positive, not just being carbon neutral, but being carbon positive. So it's been a great opportunity for not just MLA to be showing what we've been doing all, you know, these years, but also it's been a great opportunity for producers to tell that story as well. And we are certainly seeing an increase in coverage of that and a greater awareness, I think, of how far the industry has come and how far ahead we are of so many other industries in Australia. A question for Vero. You're not getting away, Vero, without a question. Just a question about our involvement, or how are we helping to inform the dietary guidelines review?
All our investments over the last 10 years have generated data and insights around those topic areas we discussed, because we know that's the kind of information that's needed in dietary guidelines review. I mean, essentially, for instance, with the red meat consumption and CSIRO's work on healthy diets and environment, that has really generated evidence that's specific to Australia, because the problem is a lot of the global evidence is not always applicable at a regional level. So it's really important that we've got this Australian data that can help policymakers interpret the evidence and work out what is the right dietary guidelines for Australians. It's the same with this whole question about Australians eating, you know, world leaders of red meat consumption. The issue is not whether, you know, how do we compare to other countries? The issue is how do we compare with what Australians need to follow a healthy diet and a sustainable diet.
Vera, thank you. Terrific. Well, look, time has got away from us, and that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to all our presenters, to Sam, to Vero, and to Desley, and thank you for your interest, not just for today, but your interest and participation over the last few weeks as we've been presenting through these webinars some of the outcomes of what MLA is investing in and delivering on your behalf. Please take some time to fill in the survey, if you could, just a couple of minutes. That's in the chat and will also be sent to you over the next day or so. We'd love to hear your responses. We're really keen to continually improve how we report back to our levy payers, our stakeholders, and all your suggestions are very welcome as to how we might do that. All the recordings of the 5 webinars in this series are on our website. Well, they will be. This final one will be as soon as we're complete. If you know anyone who you think might be interested, please let them know about them. They're very easy to download and to view. Of course, don't forget next Thursday is MLA's annual general meeting. The login access to the AGM was included in the notice of meeting pack sent to you recently. But for now, it's goodbye from the team here at MLA. Thanks again for watching and take care. Bye now.